Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to another Ref Brandon and the Todd family YouTube video. Wherever you are, whatever you may be doing, thank you so much for making Ref Brandon and the Todd family a part of your day. We always greatly appreciate it. It's a Wednesday, so if you follow the channel, you know that means it's time for this week's Top 10 Countdown. We do one each and every week here on the channel and have did one every single week dating all the way back to March when the channel started, with the exception of 1 week, and that was the week my wife and I were out of town on vacation. And I got to be honest, all the way up until probably Monday, I really had no idea what this week's Top 10 Countdown was going to be about. I haven't had any suggestions in a while, which is totally understandable because I know it's holiday time. Plus, if you're a sports fanatic, this is the best time of the year because you have football going on. The NBA's already started. College basketball's fixing to start. NHL has started. Baseball's in the World Series. So there's so much going on right now that it really is hard for a lot of people to sit back and think. So I haven't had any suggestions. So all the way up until Monday, I was like, man, it's 2 days away from the Top 10 Countdown, and I ain't got the slightest idea what I'm going to talk about. But then yesterday, I talked about college basketball, did the AP poll since college basketball starts coming up here in a couple of weeks. So after that video, I was like, you know what? The last 2 weeks, I did a Top 10 Countdown, and it's been talking about college football coaches. So tomorrow, I'm going to talk about college basketball coaches. So this week's Top 10 Countdown is going to be the top 10 all-time winningest college basketball coaches. And of course, when I'm done, I'll give you a couple of notable names that you'll probably recognize that barely missed the top 10 in wins. But if you follow college basketball, even if you're a casual fan that just watches big games or rivalry games like Duke and North Carolina and then the basketball tournament, you'll recognize probably every name on this list, especially the top half, because the top half is mostly guys that are still coaching. So without further ado, let's go ahead and do this week's Top 10 Countdown, which is the top 10 winningest all-time college basketball coaches. Number 10 on the list is Rollie Massimino. Now, don't quote me on this, but I believe his real name was actually Roland, but everybody called him Rollie. He won 816 career games. He passed away back in 2017. He coached at Villanova, UNLV, Cleveland State, and Northwood. Number 9 on the list is a man that just passed away in June of this year at 92 years old, I believe. He won 830 career games at Mount St. Mary's. Number 8 on the list, and if you follow college basketball, you'll know this name because if you've ever watched Kentucky, their basketball coliseum, which they call Rupp Arena, is named after him. That's Adolph Rupp, who I believe passed away in 1977. He won 876 games as the coach of Kentucky. Number 7 on the list is a man that passed away back in 2015, and he won 879 games as the head coach of North Carolina, and that was Dean Smith. And number 6 on the list is the first guy that you're going to recognize his name because he still coaches. He's actually won exactly 900 games heading into this college basketball season. He's still coaching. Like I said, he's 68 years old. I believe he's coached at Walsh, Akron, Cincinnati, Kansas State, and now he coaches at West Virginia, and that is Bob Huggins. Now, of course, Bob Huggins, pretty much everybody knows, not just because he's coached for so long, but he's the guy, if you ever watched West Virginia, he always has a stool. Most coaches either stand or they sit, right there with their players. He doesn't. He almost takes the stool to the scorer's table and sets it there and sits down. And he's done that since he was coaching at Cincinnati, probably longer than that, but he was coaching at Cincinnati when I started watching college basketball back in the mid to late 90s. Number 5 on the list, won 902 career games at Army, Indiana, and Texas Tech. So, of course, Bob Huggins will probably pass him in the first month of this season, and that is another Bob Knight. Number 4 on the list is a man whose name I mentioned yesterday, talking about him recently retiring. He won 903 games as the coach of Kansas and North Carolina, and that was Roy Williams. And number 3 on the list is a man who actually has retired. He retired not long after he won a national championship, and he was retired for, I guess, probably about a decade, and then came out of retirement and now coaches a small school in Connecticut called St. Joseph. But he won his national championship as the head coach of Connecticut, and he also coached at Northeastern. Jim Calhoun so far has won 918 career games. Number 2 on the list is a guy that's been coaching this school for years, and he's either 77 or 79. I'm not sure which one, but he has a birthday, I believe, in November, and I think he's 77, but he has shown no signs of being ready to retire or wanting to retire, even though he's old enough to retire, and that's Jim Boeheim, who has 982 wins at Syracuse. So he's 18 wins away from 1,000, and Syracuse is normally either ranked or just outside of the top 25. So more than likely, Jim Boeheim will be the second coach to ever reach 1,000 wins, and he should get there at some time and some point during the season. Number 1 on the list is a man who has announced that this will be his final year. He's coached at Army and Duke. He's won 1,170 career games, and that is Mike Krzyzewski. Of course, I've always called him Mike Krzyzewski because of the way his name is spelled, but of course it's Polish, so it's pronounced Krzyzewski, even though it looks like Krzyzewski. He's 30 away from 1,200, which is possible. That is a feat he could get this year, but he's announced that this is his final year, so if he doesn't get there this year, he won't get there. But Duke only won 15 games last year, so to get to 30, he'll have to double last year. I just don't think Duke's improved that much. The only way he gets to 30 is if they pretty much go undefeated in the regular season or go deep in the tournament, and I just don't think they're that good. He's got 1,170 right now, so Jim Boeheim is a little less than 200 behind him, and Jim Boeheim is actually older than Mike Krzyzewski. But Krzyzewski's retiring. Jim Boeheim acts like he's going to coach 20 more years, and he might. Because a lot of times when coaches like Jim Boeheim start coaching so young and so early in life, and it's all they've ever done, when you get to the point to where you're old enough to retire, you're scared to retire because you're scared that, that's your life. And when you're no longer doing it, you have nothing to live for. And it's easy to think that way when it's all you've ever done. If you watch college football or have, Joe Paterno coached Penn State forever, and he looked like he was in tip-top shape. But he was pretty much forced out at Penn State, and when they forced him out, he was gone in 6 months. So Jim Boeheim may be scared he would suffer the same fate. So he may coach till he's 90, and if he does, he'll catch Mike Krzyzewski. 200 wins is a feat that he could get and catch Mike Krzyzewski if he coached, 8 more years, because if he averages 25 wins a year, he could get to 200 wins in 8 years. And Syracuse normally wins 20-plus games every year. But he may coach 1 or 2 more years and decide he's done. But he acts like he still enjoys it. He still loves it. Syracuse still loves it. So he might coach 10 more years. But, of course, whether or not he catches him, Doesn't matter. People are going to look at how many championships did you win. And right now, Jim Boeheim is nowhere near Mike Krzyzewski. But a lot of times the championships are overblown. In my opinion, Dan Marino is one of the best, if not the best quarterback ever played based on pure talent. I've never seen anybody throw a football prettier than Dan Marino. Still to this day, I ain't seen it. But people always say, well, he never won a championship. So sometimes championships can be overblown because there's plenty of guys that were great at whatever sport they played and never won anything. And then there's some guys that were just average players at whatever sport they played, but they were lucky enough to play on teams that won 5 or 6 championships. Same way with coaches. There's some coaches that are great that have never won anything. And then there's some coaches that are just average coaches that are lucky enough to win 4 or 5 championships. But since Jim Boeheim is nowhere near Mike Krzyzewski in championships, that's what people will compare him to. But you look at Dean Smith. When he coached at North Carolina, they were pretty much a top 10, if not top 5, every single year. But Dean Smith didn't even sniff winning 4, 5, 6 championships. They were always there, but they never won. But championships are hard to win, and no matter what sport it is. But in college basketball, you don't have near the depth as far as players that you're allowed to have in baseball or football. In football, you've got so many guys on your roster. You can have 10, 11 injuries, and you still got plenty of players left over. This year, you look at Clemson. Clemson has 18 players that are currently either out with injuries or out for the season, and they've still got 65 players left over. That's how many players that you can have in college football. So most of the time, when a player gets injured, no big deal, next man up, because that's how much depth you have. Now, of course, the fans of that team, when they lose, that's going to be their excuse. Well, we lost because so-and-so was injured. When the reality of it was you lost because you got beat. But in college basketball, it's not that way. You're only allowed to have, 12, 13, 14 players max. So if you have a roster of 12, 13, 14 players, really most of the time you have, 2 or 3 guys that are really good rebounders, 2 or 3 guys that are just good team players, and then you have 2 or 3 guys that can shoot and give you points. And if 1 or 2 of guys you have that are good at producing points for you in one way or another, if they get hurt or they get cold come tournament time, you're in trouble. So it might look like you've got a great roster, but then all of a sudden that one guy that gives you 35 points goes cold and gives you 10. Well, guess what? You're toast. So it's hard a lot of times comparing coaches, especially in college basketball, because championships are so hard to come by, but that's just what people always use when comparing people. It's always been that way. It's always going to be that way. And a couple guys that barely missed the list, Eddie Sutton, who of course coached many years at Oklahoma State, and then we have Cliff Ellis, who's actually still coaching. He coached for a long time at Clemson, and then he coached for a long time at Auburn. I believe he's currently coaching at Coastal Carolina. And then we have Luke Olson, who, of course, coached many, many years at Arizona and won a national championship there. That's a couple of guys that were just outside the top 10 whose names you recognize if you follow college basketball. So stay tuned next Wednesday when we have another top 10 countdown. And since I've been doing coaches now for the last 3 weeks, I may do some kind of countdown again next week that involves coaches. I'm not sure yet. Stay tuned. I know if I don't know, nobody else has any idea either. So that's what makes the top 10 countdown so interesting. Let's go ahead and get our dad joke of the day. I told a chemistry joke. There was no reaction. And that wraps it up for today's Ref Brandon and the Todd Family YouTube video. Until next time, it's Ref Brandon saying, just like in pro wrestling, life can be over by the count of 3. Tell your friends and family how much you love them. Bye.